Hello, everybody. My name is Sierra Thompson, and I decided to do my topic on cocaine. Here are just some of the objectives that we're going to go over during this PowerPoint presentation. Let's start off with a very early brief history. Cocaine is actually in the form of a plant that grows in South America. The indigenous people would actually chew the leaves to get that energetic or high feeling because they would basically be extracting the cocaine themselves by this chewing. It became so popular that they decided to include it in their culture and religious ceremonies. A little bit of a more recent history is that cocaine was first isolated by German chemist Albert Niemann, and cocaine actually began to be used for medical purposes such as anesthesia and nerve blocking. A fun fact was that John Pember added cocaine to Coca-Cola, but had to remove the ingredient due to its negative effects, and that took place in 1902. Cocaine was actually banned in 1922 due to its high volume death count, but it re-emerged in the 1970s and 1980s. So what exactly is cocaine? Cocaine is a stimulant, and there are two forms of this drug. There is crack, which is right here. It's in the form of a rock or a crystal. And then there is cocaine, which is in the form of a powder, and that's what we're going to be reviewing today. So what is in cocaine? So as I stated earlier, that this drug is actually derived from leaves, and the leaves themselves only have about 0.3 to 0.7% of cocaine in them, and other alkaloids, which is just organic plant matter. Cocaine is never pure, and the average purity of cocaine in the United States is approximately 55%. We'll get into some of those reasons as to why cocaine isn't exactly pure later on. So let's look into how cocaine is made. So while this process differs depending on where the cocaine is prepared, there's a lot of similarities still within the different processes. So first off, the leaves are harvested in large amounts. It takes approximately 900 pounds of coca leaf to make about 1 kilo of the actual cocaine. These leaves are soaked in gasoline and other solvents such as acid, water, and bleach to help get the cocaine down to its base form, which is cocaine hydrochloride. The leaves are then drained and mixed with lime or cement, again, to get it down to its base form. Once that last process takes place and those other chemicals and solvents that were used to get it down to its base form are removed, what's left is heated and pressed into bricks, which you can see down here. So how does cocaine affect the brain? Like, why do these different feelings occur? Like, why do we have more alertness? Why are we euphoric? What's going on here that causes that? So I'm going to go over this very briefly, even though we learned it previously in the semester. These neurotransmitters and these neurons are going to play a major role in why cocaine gives us the effect that we do. So let's remember some terms: synaptic cleft here. We have the presynaptic neuron and the postsynaptic neuron. So in the presynaptic neuron, there are neurotransmitters that are called vesicles. These vesicles here actually contain the neurotransmitters that we're going to get into later on. They're specific for cocaine. But these neurotransmitters, or these vesicles, attach themselves to the presynaptic neuron membrane and are eventually released into the synaptic cleft. They then bind to receptors that are on the postsynaptic cleft, and this can either excite this postsynaptic cleft or can cause a decline. Later on, those neurotransmitters have to be removed from the synaptic cleft eventually, either through a process called diffusion or reuptake. Reuptake is basically the recycling of these neurons, and then they are eventually fused to the presynaptic neuron membrane again and released. Another process is through the enzymes breaking down those neurotransmitters into their base form, and then those chemicals are then recycled back into the presynaptic neuron. So let's look at specifically how cocaine affects the brain. It inhibits the reuptake of monoamine neurotransmitters, which are the specific neurotransmitters that we're going to talk about in this process of how cocaine specifically affects the brain. So here we can see this is healthy. This is basically what our last slide was. We can see that these monoamine neurotransmitters are doing what they're supposed to. They're being reuptake back into the presynaptic neuron. But because cocaine inhibits the reuptake of the monoamine neurotransmitters, it actually is going to basically break down this transporter or this transmitter and is going to inhibit reuptake. So that means there's going to be an overload of those chemicals in our brain, such as dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. So because there is an overload of these neurons, that means more of these receptors are going to have neurotransmitters attached to them, causing more action or fire action potential in this postsynaptic neuron. So here's another image. You can see here that the cocaine is blocking the transporter here, or transmitter, whichever you would like to call it. We can see that there's just so many neurotransmitters in the synaptic cleft, and there's again a lot of the neurotransmitters attaching themselves to the receptors. So let's look at the different administration factors of cocaine. So there's oral administration, which is when cocaine is rubbed on the gums. There's intranasally, which is snorting. Intravenously is injecting, and inhalation. So oral administration is going to take effect in about 10 minutes and last about 90 minutes. Then snorting is going to take effect between 3 to 5 minutes of the time it's taken and only lasts about 45 to 90 minutes. And injection and inhalation are almost exactly the same. The effects are immediate because the drug is getting direct access to the bloodstream by being injected straight into the bloodstream or being inhaled into the lungs, which your lungs are just coated in vessels and stuff. So it's just basically injecting into your bloodstream, but via your lungs. Those effects are going to be immediate and last only about 15 to 20 minutes. So effects of cocaine on the body, I've included some short-term effects here. You can see there's sensitivity to touch, light, and sound. It can cause paranoia. And I want to pay more attention to these long-term effects, which are nosebleeds, loss of smell, problems swallowing, cough, or even lung problems. So if cocaine is regularly inhaled or snorted, it can damage the passage or the lining of your nose and the structure that separates your nostrils. If you're injecting cocaine regularly, you can possibly pick up a disease such as HIV, which can occur from sharing utensils and other terms of administration. And also you can cause abscesses under the skin. So looking at the cost of cocaine, it is considered one of the most expensive stimulant drugs. And somebody who has an extreme cocaine addiction can actually spend up to $200,000 a year feeding that addiction. So here we can see the average price per gram, which is about $112, and an 8-ball, which is between $120 and $300. So we're like, why are these prices fluctuating so much? That's because the purity, availability, and location. So I mentioned earlier that cocaine is never pure. And I mean this because it can be mixed with household items such as flour, cornstarch, or even other illicit drugs such as heroin and fentanyl. The cost can fluctuate because of availability. So obviously, law enforcement does everything they can to inhibit drug sales. So if more law enforcement is present in a specific area, drug dealers might limit the amount of production they have or sales happening in that specific area, having them up their prices. And also location, because cocaine is brought from South America, mainly to Mexico, the states that are lining the Mexico and United States border, those states are going to be a little cheaper to buy cocaine, while the northern states, because transporting is so dangerous and very high risk, the cost of northern state purchases of cocaine are going to be a little more expensive. So who is most affected? People 12 years and older. About over 5 million people reported using cocaine, and over 1 million people reported having actual addiction to cocaine. It was shown through research that men have a greater chance, or reported more men in the population reported using cocaine over women, and you can see those percents right here. It's a very big jump. So while cocaine does affect basically everybody, whites, African Americans, and Hispanics are going to be those who are most affected. Because this drug is very expensive, we're going to see more white individuals being affected by the drug. And actually, African Americans are more at risk for overdose because minorities are going to be willing to pay less for less pure drug. Because those drugs are mixed with other very potent drugs, it can cause overdose very easily. So here I've included a graph that shows deaths due to overdose. We can see that it's, increased by the thousands from 1999 to 2020. And again, as I stated earlier, Blacks are more at risk for overdose. Some types of treatment: while there's no medications that are approved by the FDA, there are behavioral interventions such as contingency management theory, cognitive behavioral therapies, and then there's some community efforts such as therapeutic communities and community-based recovery groups. Well, I hope you guys learned something new about cocaine and enjoyed my presentation. I appreciate you guys watching, and good luck for the remaining of the summer.